Good evening, and we are back from Washington tonight.
We're going to begin here with the outbreak of a mystery virus in China.
China ordering a quarantine for the entire city of Wuhan.
The number of infected exploded over the weekend.
The virus started in the Chinese city of Wuhan.
Racing to contain the potential spread of a deadly new strain of coronavirus.
With the growing concern as the toll from that deadly coronavirus.
The coronavirus.
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 And tonight, that first case here in the U.S.
I'm Maggie Horniman, the retired superintendent from Avon Schools. And I'll never forget that Saturday night of Avon Education Foundation's Monte Carlo night. We had a fabulous event, so much fun. Went home exhausted and got up the next morning thinking I need to run into the office and send some thank you notes and take care of a few things. But sure enough, a few minutes before noon on that Sunday, as I was headed into Mass, I received a text saying that Dr. McCormick needed to speak to me and that it was time sensitive. And for the life of me, I couldn't think of a single reason that Dr. McCormick would be contacting me. So of course I said I'm available immediately. And she quickly explained that there was an Avon student, and she identified a Hickory student who may have been exposed to COVID and had been in school on Friday, and that they were going to be testing and determining if this student was COVID positive, but we should prepare for that possibility.
Maggie calls me, emergency meeting at the central office.
And we arranged to meet here at 3 o'clock. And we began talking about what would happen if we found out this student was positive.
So I'll never forget, it was a Sunday afternoon. My kids were out doing their thing, and I got a call actually from Dr. Wyndham at the time. And he said, "Hey, Emily, I just want to make you aware, something's up."
That's what we did, and we sat around that table for a good 7 or 8 hours and figured out what are we going to do? How are we going to approach this?
They told us that we would have the test results by about 7 or 8 that evening. And 7 o'clock passed, 8 o'clock passed, 9 o'clock passed, 10 o'clock passed. And shortly after 10 o'clock, we got the word that the student had indeed tested positive. But we put out that phone call at about 10:30 at night.
Good evening, Avon Community School Corporation families. On Sunday, March 8th at 10:25 p.m., our school corporation was notified by the Hendricks County Health Department that a student from Hickory Elementary has tested positive for COVID-19 coronavirus.
Breaking news from Hendricks County, where students in one local school system will be studying from home today.
Good morning to you. This will impact nearly 10,000 students here.
10,000 students.
In a letter sent to parents just before 10:30 last night.
I remember I went home at about midnight that night, and all night long the phone was ringing because people were obviously very concerned.
A student at Hickory Elementary School tested positive for coronavirus.
They're being told to keep them at home, small groups. They want to keep this virus from spreading.
I was very overwhelmed because you had heard about it, but you didn't think that it was going to hit so close to home.
When we came into work Monday, we found out that we had a second presumptive positive case of another student in another school. Well, I had probably written 10 different statements. Schools are working closely to determine the web of individuals who have had direct contact with the two students. No matter how I worded the statement, someone felt it needed to be different. That web has grown very large. We realized that this was much bigger than just two schools.
We need to prepare, we need to be safe, but we don't need to panic.
The job of schools right now is the safety, security, and well-being of our students.
Close all Avon Community Schools through Friday, March 20th. I couldn't be more proud of our food service department, who made the decision immediately that we would be feeding students immediately.
We started on that Monday afternoon about lunchtime thinking about a plan, very quickly implemented to start passing out meal bags. At that point, we were offering them out to really anybody who had a need.
I mean, it was a machine here, getting kids fed, getting packets made, keeping people safe.
I was really affected from home because, my heart went out to everyone.
We had a central office room where hundreds and thousands of pages were being copied for packets.
Our technology department was fielding questions left and right. The phone just kept ringing about all the things.
It was just a level of intensity that I don't know that I hope, we'll never see again for a long time.
It was just amazing to see all of us come together and take care of our students.
And I remember staying up until 2 a.m, sometimes recording myself, and we were trying to still keep content because we just assumed that we were going back.
We just sort of went into action. So we, as quickly as we could, made a plan.
I could just tell, this mom was heartbroken. She goes, "My kid is not getting it. Can you please?" So I remember getting on and just doing a one-on-one with her right then and there.
I'll never forget, one mom called me, and she happened to be a single mom who was trying to work as well, and she called me in tears, and she just said, "I can't help my child, I can't get to work, this is horrible." And I had so much respect for her that she had the courage to call me personally and to say, "This doesn't work, you have to do something." And so every one of our departments had to figure out, what do we do to try to keep students learning for the next 2 weeks? And very quickly, we determined that we had been way too ambitious those first 2 weeks.
So, thankfully, we had the 2 weeks of spring break to kind of reset and go, all right, how do we start service for our free and reduced kids? We shifted our entire focus to them.
The logistics that Emily Cates and her staff figured out was just phenomenal. And so for 8 or 9, 10 weeks in a row, there we were once a week giving that food out. Rain or shine, no problem.
We thought there was an end in 2 weeks and we could manage this because we've done it before. We know how to do e-learning. We're Avon, we've done it before, But when you want to try and sustain that until the end of the school year, that's a lot.
And so our curriculum team put together a new plan for post-spring break that really looked at learning about 3 days a week, with the other 2 days for planning and for students to have individual support from teachers. And that immediately became clear that was a much more manageable feature.
I created a program where families could come pick up meal packs 1 day a week. So we had to think about including the allergen information. We had to think about including the cooking instructions. It took a village. It wasn't just food service. Our maintenance team, our grounds team, custodians helped us.
If all of these students on free and reduced lunch are going through this line to get food every week, I'm wondering if they're having trouble also getting school supplies. And so I got with the board and said, hey, we have all of these school supplies that we normally use to provide teachers through our SOS store. I said, all of those supplies are sitting down there. Let's try to get them into the hands of students.
And so the Avon Education Foundation stepped up and joined us every week when we distributed food to our families who needed those lunches.
So we got together and we put together, I think, about 100 bags for the first distribution. We flew through them in an hour, and I felt horrible. I got a phone call from Verizon asking what they could do to help. So Verizon was so amazing and granted us $5,000. And I went out through Avon, and I think I purchased every school supply in town. There's a pattern here, and there's a need here in Avon for students that need school supplies.
Well, needless to say, that whole spring, the questions were relentless. What are we going to do about graduation? What about the seniors and prom? So many of those important rituals to our students. What are we going to do about spring sports? And we just kept saying, we need to wait, we need to see what the governor says, we need to see how this develops. But I remember thinking when the governor said that the next decision point was early May, I remember thinking to myself, we aren't going to come back. And sometimes you think something, but you just hope you're wrong. But the day that the governor announced that schools needed to remain closed for the remainder of the year, I cried. And I cried for a lot of reasons. I cried for our kids, primarily. And I remember putting out a tweet that night that said, how sad and sorry I was, and that today we would just hurt. We just needed to feel what we were feeling, which is sadness and hurt, and then we needed to love each other and get through it. And we did.
She'd been working to set up a chamber music club, which ultimately led to a very surprising summer concert series.
I saw a student last week play Somewhere Over the Rainbow for somebody as they were actively passing. That's as human of a connection as they get. That could never be taught in a classroom, and that's why I teach.
Here in Avon, we are surrounded by people who think of others first.
Dr. Horniman retired, and I became superintendent July 1. We were in constant communication with the health department, and that every decision that we were making was aligned with what they felt.
And so poor Dr. Wyndham, I would pace by his office, back and forth. Are we going back to school?
That month of July was again, unlike anything I think I'll probably ever experience in my career.
I'll never forget, he popped his head into my office one day and he said, guess what? We're going back to school, and not only are we going back to school, we're going on time.
To think about, how do I completely change the layout of my classroom? How do I completely change instruction? And we are really fortunate in Avon that we have a health department that valued in-person instruction.
So when we first heard, I didn't really realize that virtual was going to be an option.
So once we announced that decision, I do remember that we did get a lot of pushback from families who were still concerned. And
Principal Harris came to me, she called me, and she said, would you like to teach virtually? And I said, I don't know. And I said, can I have some time to think about it? And she said, oh, yeah, you've got about an hour. I thought, why not? Let's try it. And so I agreed to teach virtually.
Dr. LeMay contacted me and said, look, we're approaching school, as you know, and we are needing really a coordinator for virtual learning. And so I was ready to go. So I had a few questions.
My initial thought was, okay, how are we going to get 20-some 6-year-olds to keep their masks over their faces all the time?
But there is an entire process that we had to build, just like every school had to build, of how do we contact trace? How do we have seating charts? What does that structure look like? And that's what principals and teachers spent all summer doing.
So I looked at my calendar and said, okay, the first day of school is going to be July 29th. I called my board and I said, hey, I've been crunching some numbers. We're going to move forward with the supply drive. I've got 30 days. And if my numbers are accurate, I need to raise $30,000 in 30 days. And they all looked at me like I was absolutely crazy, but said, you know what? Go for it. And this community came together like I have never seen before. And we raised that $30,000 in about 20 days. So what we did was we hosted a huge back-to-school supply drive. I was adamant that this be a shopping experience for these kids. I did not want them to just show up and say, here's your backpack, this is what you get, no choices for you. I wanted them to come and I wanted them to have a choice and say, well, I prefer the blue backpack, or I want that pink ruler instead. But when registration went out and we finally got the final numbers, we ended up distributing over 1,200 backpacks stuffed with supplies. And I just think it's a testament to how amazing this community is. I have seen people give during this pandemic more than ever. And it's just so amazing to be part of this Avon community and be part of this Avon School Corporation, where we truly are one unit and we're there for one another.
10,000 children are headed back to school in one Indiana county, but the virus is still spreading throughout that community. And like so many other towns, cities, parents and teachers, well, they're quite nervous.
Tomorrow's a big day for students and staff in Avon.
Tomorrow, the Avon Community School Corporation will hold in-person classes for the first time since March.
It's the first time back in a classroom in months.
Now at noon, some central Indiana kids are returning to school. Avon schools are the first in our area to get back to class. Students have not been in school since March.
Avon Community Schools became the first district in the state to switch over to e-learning at the start of this pandemic, and now it is the first district to go back.
I think we were truly reinventing the wheel. And I think that, like, as a team, the virtual teachers as, you know, a whole, like, we really were figuring it out together and helping each other. But it was hard. It just didn't feel quite right. But once I had my kids and I actually had their little faces, I thought, okay, this is real. Even though this isn't what a classroom normally looks like, this is a real classroom. But I think I just want them to look back and know that we sort of made history. You know, this little kindergarten class, like, that we did it, that they learned via Zoom. I mean, just this, you know, the technology, how amazing it was that we could do all these things. And I hope they don't forget it. I don't think they will, but I hope they don't.
You know, people have said to me, I would never want your job. And I go, I have a pretty good job, and my job is not near as hard as what our teachers have done every day in figuring out. I mean, they are the face. They are faced every day with 25 students that they have to figure out how to teach in a pandemic. My job is to just help them be as successful as possible. And same thing, our food service folks that have figured out, how do we serve food? How do we do this when things are shut down? Custodians that are cleaning things and sanitizing and disinfecting in ways we never had done before. I just think every part of how have we been able to be in person for as long as we've been in person, it's because everyone in this district has gone above and beyond to meet the needs of our students, and in a time of incredible challenges. But we all knew this is what we do for our kids, and so we figured it out. And I think that's just the part that I will always remember about this era is how amazed I have been at the dedication of our staff.